Hello everyone, welcome back. Luke Boothman here, Apex Wilderness Adventures. We're continuing on with our Adventure Park Trigger refactor, and we're going to continue on with the handler today. So last time we got the before insert into a pretty good shape. We knocked it out because there was only one piece of logic that was related to it, which had to do with the set price books. So let's go ahead and fold these, and let's go on to the after insert context. So this one has a little bit more going on, which would make sense because we know from a test in a previous video when we looked at unit tests first, we knew that not only do we set a price book when a park is created, but we create other data too. And it would make sense that this extra data would be created in a different context because that's usually how we write Apex, is that if there's something that gets updated on the record that was created, we'll probably do it in a before context. And if there's other things that run, we'll do it in an after context. So we'll probably be seeing something along those lines. So let's not get too far ahead of ourselves though. And let's see what we have going on here. So there was a pattern that was advocated in the past that I think a lot of people still agree with, that I don't really agree with. And it told us that in every method, we should put all of our variables at the top. Now, sometimes it makes sense, but sometimes it doesn't make sense. It just depends in my book, right? To me, I think that the variables should be close to their usage. I don't see any benefit from knowing everything that could possibly happen or that will happen during the method up front. I want to see it as it happens in real time. That way I can read my code and step through it logically. If I have a bunch of variables that don't come into play until later, and some of them may not even come into play at all just based on a certain condition, then I'm going to spend mental cycles and cognitive energy trying to figure out what all this stuff does on one hand. On the other hand, I'm going to be doing this, scrolling back up, scrolling to the bottom, scrolling back up, scrolling to the bottom. I just think it's probably well-meaning, and maybe there was a time when it was a good idea, but I don't believe it's a good idea. So one thing we're going to do here is we're just going to check and see, where are these variables used, and let's get them closer to where they're supposed to be. And if they are where they're supposed to be, then that's great. Okay. So one way we can do that is by just removing things. I can cut that out, and I can see that that variable where we're getting our standard price books has nothing to do with this for loop. So if I was to collapse that for loop, I can see that this is being declared up top, but it's not being used except for down below. And so in this case, I'm going to cut it out from here, and I'm going to paste it here. And I think that makes the code more readable because now I know that this method, this variable, this SOQL query, has absolutely nothing to do with our logic where we're trying to, partition our data, collect our data into the right data structures conditionally to operate on in the helper. It has a lot to do with a specific type of functionality, which we can see is that when we create a price book entry, we need the standard price book. So this is directly related to that, and it's only related to that. So this, I believe that reduces confusion. I believe that makes the code easier to understand. We can see accounts here is being used, and it's one of the first things being used. So it does make sense for it to be at the top because it's the first thing that's being used if we read from top to bottom, which we typically do. We can see that the account by park ID is similarly being used, and it's used right after accounts, so that looks good. We can see that products is next, and that looks good. Then we have price book entries. So if I remove this, nothing in here is going to break. It's going to break down below. So this variable is related to this code. So removing this is going to also kind of visually free up a space so we can see what happens that's close together. Let's look at our assets. I'm going to remove that. Nothing here breaks. it breaks there. So we're going to put it down below, leaving us with the product by park ID, which is being used here. Great. So good, right? This is a little bit easier to read. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at variable names now. So these are accounts. They're accounts we're going to insert. So maybe we do want to say accounts to insert. This is an account by park ID, and we can see that it is an account by park ID, perfectly named. These are products, and we're going to insert those. So we could also say products to insert. And we can see we have a typo on this one because our casing isn't being followed, our camel casing. But we do have a product by park ID, so the name is good. Let's just go ahead and fix that minor typo. Looking good. Let's go ahead and rerun our tests. Easy peasy, no problem. All right, let's continue on. And we can see that these are new parks. There's only park. We don't have old parks, but maybe we do ourselves a favor by just being consistent, calling this a new park. It's pretty easy to do. We're creating accounts. We're doing it with the constructor, so that looks nice. We're adding this to an insert, and we're putting it in a map. Do we need both, right? Do we really need both? Well, it depends. What else are we doing with these accounts to insert? If it's the same values, which it is, it's the same account that goes into the map and that goes into the list. Are we doing anything else with this list? And we're not. So again, this is noise. It's just noise, right? Like this isn't adding any value to our to what we're doing necessarily. Maybe the name of it is a little bit cleaner to read than accounts to insert by park ID. But in this case, I think there's nothing wrong with account by park ID. So let's go ahead and remove that. Remove the insert. And we're just going to use our map. And we'll get the values. And we'll insert them. Okay. Continue on with product. It's the same thing. We have a product, putting it in both a list and a map. Our list is only being used for insertion. It's noise, doesn't help us out at all. This is going to be a little bit cleaner to work with. So we don't need that. We'll check if it's empty, and we'll get our values. Good. We'll rerun our tests. All right. So it's easy to kind of be undisciplined with your commits. I would really much rather every time I did something substantial, like move those variables around, do a commit. Probably because I'm talking, I'm not thinking about it, but I can't really use that excuse because sometimes I forget in general. So just kind of, decide how strict you want to be. But with this, I'm not too worried about it. A lot of these refactoring commits, like I mentioned before, reviewing them is not very fun. It's really the outcome that you worry about and the process to get there. It's pretty mechanical. So we're going to do a few things. We're going to move variables closer to usage and remove unnecessary necessary. How do you spell unnecessary? Necessary lists. Good. Okay. So see how much cleaner this is? Like this went from a lot to a much tighter compact space. Now, all this is happening in the insert context, and I'm not loving that, right? I mean, this is going to happen every time. There's no conditional logic, so maybe this is okay. But I would still most likely prefer that this code lived in a helper. So let's see, let's keep going and see how we feel about it. The reason why that matters is that we may need to do more stuff in the future, right? There's no reason to believe this is always going to be the only thing that happens when a new park is inserted. And all of this is related to creating supporting data, creating our accounts, products, and later we're going to see our price book entries and asset. But in the future, we could have other things that need to happen. We could have callouts, we could have other kinds of functionality need to happen. And when we have a little bit of a break in the design, that opens the floodgates for more and more breaks over time. And through that, those small little breaks, we collapse the design that we had in mind. So this is an interesting one here because this is the only thing that happens. So let's just keep going though for now. All right, so we're getting a standard price book. We're creating a list of price book entries and assets, and we're passing in, or we're looping over our parks. So we can again say new park. We have a standard PBE, and we have a comment. So I'd create a price book entry in a standard price book. How valuable is that comment? I don't think it's very valuable. This is a great name. And this is a good example of an exception to the rule where sometimes acronyms make sense because PBE, price book entry, pretty common lingo in the Salesforce ecosystem. So it's a little bit easier than writing out price book entry, which can be long. Sometimes there's things in the business domain where they typically shorten stuff. And so those acronyms can be useful to save space. If everyone knows them and everyone understands them, it's different than using a single letter variable because it has context, right? It has context because we know what it is. And that's what matters. That's how you know when you can break your convention or not, is whether it still upholds the convention. And a abbreviation that contains context upholds the convention. But we don't need the comment because it's very obvious what this is doing. We are creating this with our same structure of the constructor, which is nice. Again, we're creating a price book entry that's a custom one. If the comments help you, no shade, right? That's fine. This is a custom PBE. I see that we're creating those. I don't need that, but you do you. And then we have our asset that we're creating. And again, so this is looking pretty good, right? I do think that all of this should be one singular method. And I think all of it should live in the helper. Maybe not all one method. We might break this out into two parts. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new method that's going to be a public method, public static void. And this is going to be create related data. Maybe you have a better name for it. That's fine with me. We have this is going to be a list of parks. And we really can take this whole big bad boy here, cut it out, and move it here. Because this is all helper-esque code. And we're going to break a little bit of that because it's not called new over here. We just called it parks because it's kind of on the other side of the fence. And now we could be really, careful if we wanted to and just check that there's just to kind of keep our convention if it's not empty, which it should never be empty. So it is kind of pointless. Create related data with the new parks. All right. Now, if in the future we did need to do something else on insert, it'd be pretty easy to add that code in here and have the separation of concerns be maintained. All right, let's go ahead and rerun our tests. Good, that's great, right? That's really good. So we're gonna extract a method to uphold the trigger design. All right. And now I don't love that this method is super long. We're doing kind of distinct functions here where we create the accounts, then we create our products, price book entries, and the assets. But we need some of this data for this operation. And really the only thing we need is the product by park ID. The account by park ID is also being used in the asset. So we do need both of those. There's a couple of ways to solve this. If we wanted to break this down into multiple parts, we could have individual methods, or we could promote these variables as to the top of the class. To me, I don't mind the extra for loop. It's really probably not going to be that expensive, and if we run into issues, we can do it later. But what we will get out of this by breaking this down into distinctive parts is a little bit more clarity over what we're creating. So we first create accounts. We're creating related data. What is the related data? Well, so this is going to be a private static, and we're going to return a map, right? Like this. Create accounts. And we're doing that from our parks. And we are doing this. So I'll take the whole thing. We'll chop that out. We'll chop that out. We'll insert those. And then we'll return. Actually, let's do it. Yeah, that's fine. And then we'll come up here and we'll say create accounts from these parks. Then we can cut this out. Oops. We can cut this out. We can take this whole deal. And then we can also do this, which is nice. We can come in here to refactor. We can extract a method called create products. And the only thing I don't like about that is that it puts it in the wrong spot, because I would rather read this sequentially, because we first create accounts and then we create the products. But this is a lot easier to read now. The next thing we do is create price book entries. And here we don't need to return anything. So we can, again, say private static, this time void, create PBEs, because we are creating both standard and custom price book entries. So we're going to grab this. You could separate them if you wanted to. That would be fine. In this case, I'm going to combine them because it's going to make the code just a little bit more simple. We need to pass in the parks, and we need to pass in the price book map. Actually, I'd rather just copy it from here. We don't need the asset, so we'll cut that out. Cut the assets out here. And then we will call this create PBEs with our parks and our product, like that. Now we don't need this information here. We don't need that. We don't need that. And then this can all be extracted into a method. Oops. Oh boy. This is what happens when your shortcuts get the best of you. Extract a method, create assets. And we don't need that there, I don't think, do we? Oh yeah, we do, okay. And then we'll fold this, fold that, and then move our assets to the bottom. All right, now this is really easy to read, right? Isn't this code really easy to read? We want to create related data. Well, what related data do we need to create? We're going to create accounts, products, PBEs, and assets. And from the perspective of understanding this method, we can care or not care how any of these are created. And if we need to add stuff to it, it'd be very easy to add it to it, right? So let's go ahead and save this and rerun our tests. There we go. So extract methods to make public method easy to read and extend. All right, so let's look at where we went. So we had that big after insert where our separation of concerns wasn't as tight as it should have been. So we cleaned that up. Now, if in the future we needed to add more to it or we want to understand what this code is doing, it's really simple. You know, we're creating related data. What related data are we creating? We're creating accounts, products, PBEs, and assets. And if we care, we can look how each of them are being created. And if we had to change how accounts are created, we know exactly what to change, where to change it, and we don't have to worry that we're going to miss something. So I hope you see how simple all of these changes were. Like nothing that I did here was overly complicated. You know, you can kind of think of like these rough drafts of code. You start with a rough draft, and then you just make these small little logical changes that simplify and simplify to the point where your code is dead simple. You know, obvious and clear at a glance. And it won't always be that way, but you'd be surprised how often these little kind of changes can add up over time. All right, cool. So I think we're good for this episode, and we will come back, and I think we have a little bit further to go. We need to look at our before update, and we need to look at our after update context methods. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next episode.